Magic and mystery are part of my history, along with the secret of gummy berry juice. Glad to have you along, you malicious maggots, and your reward for return is another malodorous movie. And today's stale selection is sure to sting a little. 1987's Mind Killer. A sci-fi stinker about a loser lover boy unlucky with the ladies until he gets a massive mental makeover. So let's get those cerebellums salivating and see what salacious servings we'll see. We have 1 dead body, 2 cups blood, 2 cups slime, 2 naked breasts, 1 monster rat, 1 eyeball worm, giant psychic parasite, dramatic lightning cliche, bumbling loser cliche, ominous hair loss cliche, power makes one an asshole cliche, shoulder jump scare cliche, 80s synth score, motivational tape cock blockery, Rubik's cubery, telepathic Rubik's Cube assistance, bulbous head throbbing, Deus Ex Documentica, mirror punching, paper cutter sliced fingers, oozing pulsing head wound, hemorrhaging brain blood to the face, knife to the giant psychic parasite, psychic zippering, psychic boss strip down humiliation, psychic spilled drink rescue, force lightning, garter belts, sexy daydream, bat monster jump scare, monster mouth phone bite, hooded closet monster, and dollar store Jerry Lewis. First things first, I gotta say that I don't hate this movie as much as I feel that I should. I've got some major issues with it. But in some sick section of my spoiled spleen, there's a tender little spot for this one. So let's get to the polluted particulars. Our movie begins in a creepy basement full of spiderweb-covered electronics and goop-covered documents. There's also a pulsing atomic bomb, a spastic hamster puppet, and an eyeball worm. Upstairs, an old lady grabs a letter opener and heads down to the basement. Something else is down there. Something juicy. Something bulbous. Something angry. Did you like that? Well, too bad if you did, because we literally will see nothing like it for almost an hour. Because the movie is really about Warren, the loseriest loser who ever losered. He's wimpy. He's unsure of himself. He never gets the girl, and he spills ketchup on himself.
You are one pathetic loser.
He's got shelves full of self-improvement books and tapes. I mean, seriously, just look at the video he's watching. How far down the loser hole do you have to be to take advice from this fucking dweeb? I suppose it's better than looking up to this chinless monstrosity. Anyway, it doesn't help that Warren's roommate, Brad, is constantly bringing girls home from the club, making him retreat to the bedroom while the couch gets another layer of someone else's, romance. Brad tries being a good friend and passes out all sorts of advice like, be yourself. But Warren hates himself too much.
I've been myself all my life, and even I don't like me.
Well, dude, how can anyone else like you if you don't like you? Learn to love yourself first. Then and only then will you be able to love somebody else. And if you strike out and go home alone, at least you'll still enjoy the company. Warren works at a library, specifically in the archives with fellow 80s nerd Larry, who takes his fashion cues from 60s Jerry Lewis movies. And he howls. Like, a lot. The 3 guys regularly go out to the club. Warren and Larry strike out, and Brad doesn't. A new gal, Sandy, is hired to help with the library's organization, and Warren falls head over heels for her.
My God, she's beautiful.
Eventually, he works up the nerve to actually talk to her, and it's pretty cringy at best. After some really clunky chit-chat, Sandy says she has a policy of not dating coworkers. Seriously, the only thing that's missing here is the fucking Big Bang Theory's laugh track.
Well, welcome to the building.
Oh, thank you. Maybe we can have coffee sometime.
Oh, great.
Great.
Great. Well, bye.
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 One day, Warren finds a folder marked Total Mind Control and can't help but crack it open. And while reading, he drifts off to sleep for a little workplace fantasy where Sandy is presenting like a baboon in heat. Next thing you know, she's showing off her underwear and wrapping her legs around Warren on the desk.
Oh, God. Okay. So, Susan, what's it like to be in human resources? I'm done.
Suddenly, Warren starts getting more confidence and begins testing out his new mental powers, like getting free candy from the vending machines and helping Larry solve a Rubik's Cube. Well, it is the 80s, damn it. If there isn't a Rubik's Cube in the movie, how the fuck are we supposed to know it's the 80s? At home, he's making a feast and confesses to Brad that he's been reading a new self-help document, only this one is actually working for him.
Here we go again, another article.
But this one's working.
Another one that's working. Wonderful.
Listen, you ever seen me do anything like this before?
Do what? Cook dinner? You're 45 years old and have never cooked dinner before getting telepathy? Jesus, I think women are right to avoid this guy like the fucking plague-riddled dorkosaurus that he is. Out at the club, he uses his mental skills to successfully convince a lady to go home with him, and that's when Warren gets the first of many headaches. Brad confesses he's proud of Warren for bagging a chick, but Larry's not happy his best friend left him to walk home from the club, and thus we begin the inclusion of the horror trope that psychic powers make you a jerk. He uses his mental abilities on Sandy, which makes it a lot easier to talk to her. Unfortunately, Sandy is standing firm on her policy of not dating coworkers. Warren storms off after his first failure and notices large clumps of hair are suddenly falling out. The next time at the club, he runs into Sandy hanging out with some friends. Using his telepathy, he compels Sandy to kiss him, and clearly, she doesn't feel right about it. They have dinner together, and she still acts like something is wrong. In the meantime, Larry is also reading the document and developing his own mind control, but seems content to use it for smaller things like finishing crossword puzzles and experiencing life. During a conversation, Warren says the document isn't complete and that there are pages missing from the end. Unfortunately, Larry isn't able to hide his thoughts, and Warren discovers Larry has already read the missing pages and purposely hid them, specifically so Warren wouldn't see them. Enraged, Warren causes the paper cutter to slam down on Larry's fingers. Warren finds out Brad's also been reading the document, only he's not as willing to share with the suave ladies' man. But it's not enough to take the papers back. He mentally forces Brad to apologize. Later on, he finds Brad reading them a second time and says,
I thought we discussed this.
And that's when Brad admits that Warren made him apologize, but that doesn't mean he was sorry. Naturally, Warren pretends to not know what Brad is talking about. At one point, Sandy confesses to Brad that she doesn't even like Warren, but just can't help herself when she sees him. Brad says it's like Warren has control over her, and she breaks down. So apparently the psychic power can make someone do something against their will, but they are still aware that their feelings are contradictory. Kind of puts an oogie little spin on mind control, doesn't it? Brad and Larry get caught up on all the weird things that have been going on lately, and that's when we find out the pages that Larry hid away from Warren talk about a device that amplifies mental powers. A little research and we find that the author of the paper died a horrible death. Eventually, Larry pays a visit to the author's mom, who's about 5 Chicky McNuggies short of a Happy Meal. But she does confess the device in question is in the basement. Unfortunately, Warren was reading Larry's mind the whole time and now knows what he's been missing. Now, up until this point, the movie has been pretty low-key. I mean, some movies are labeled a slow burn. This one's a little closer to a no burn. Like, have you ever struck a match and it didn't ignite, and you sat there for a moment and then suddenly the match goes up in flame? Like striking it got about 95% of the way and then had to think about it a bit before it lights up? Well, imagine that the match took almost a full hour to flame on, and that's basically this movie. And we've reached the ignition point. Sandy goes over to Warren's house saying they need to talk. But when she sits down on the couch, a nasty clawed hand reaches for her, and Warren has become a giant bat monster? She runs into the bedroom to use the phone, but the mouthpiece has become an actual mouth and takes a bite. The closet door opens and some hooded demon appears, and Sandy is psychically dragged across the floor, screaming along the way while her clothes get more and more torn. She's pulled into the closet and the door slams shut, and she wakes up in a sweaty mess. Jesus! Talk about a tonal switch! Where the fuck has this shit been? More of this, please! Warren makes his way to the author's basement and finds the device. He puts on a headpiece, and the film gets all trippy. Next time we see him, he's hiding in the basement of the library and not looking very good. His color is flushed, his head is pulsing and bulbous, and he's leaking some purpley goo. Sandy goes down into the basement but feels something is wrong and runs through the archives for a while. Sorry, I couldn't resist that one. Suddenly, Warren appears behind her, and he's seen some, changes?
Try to leave my body!
He begins chasing Sandy and screams about how much he loves her. He catches up just as his head begins splitting apart, covering poor Sandy in blood and other cerebral fluids. She tries to call someone, but 911 is busy. Over in the corner, Warren's head fully splits open, and we immediately cut to Sandy visiting Brad. Now, during all of this, Larry's been at the author's house. Like, even when Warren broke in to use the device? He tries to call Brad, but can't get through. Suddenly, Sandy sounds more like Freddy Krueger.
You thought you could get her, didn't you? Mr. Playboy. It's all the girls. Well, I have her now.
And she starts throwing Brad around the room. A clawed electric tentacle reaches out from Sandy's coat right when Larry arrives. Sandy turns around to show what's left of Warren. A squidgy, tentacled brain hanging from her throat. Brad stabs the fleshy sack a couple of times and it falls to the floor. Suddenly the meat bag transforms, growing legs, eyes, a giant toothy maw, and starts crawling towards Larry. Larry turns on the device, puts on the headpiece, and gives him the old Palpatine special, blasting him into a burnt pile of cerebellum. Sandy sobs into Brad's neck, and Larry leaves to go hit up the clubs. And we see his transformation from Professor Kelp to Buddy Love has finalized. Roll the credits and turn off the VCR. Okay, so what'd we all think? Shit got turned up to fucking 11 right at the end there. I sure wish this movie didn't save its entire friggin' wad for the last 20-some minutes. But it sure was memorable. The first time I watched this one, I was kind of amazed at how much nothing was going on until the last quarter or so. But as I was writing my review, a funny thing happened. This one started growing on me like a slow creeping fungus, and the chemist downtown is all out of tough-actin' Tinactin. And I gotta say, I don't really hate this one as much as I did right after my first viewing. I appreciate the acting, the cinematography isn't anything special, but it's serviceable, and the special effects work quite well regardless of how sparingly they were used. My only real criticism is the Christ God Almighty terrible audio mixing in this one. There are whole sections of dialogue where you can barely hear a fucking word being spoken thanks to whatever noisy shit is in the room. I mean, you can kind of argue that makes sense in a loud club full of blasting music. It still sucks to not hear the dialogue, but it sort of makes sense. But when I'm in a basement room full of unfiled documents, the conversation shouldn't be drowned out by the goddamned air conditioning. Seriously, listen to the freight train running through this scene.
If I can interrupt your research here for a moment, I have someone for you to meet. This is Sandy Crawford, the library's new consultant. She's been appointed by the mayor to reorganize certain library systems. It seems things aren't as efficient as they might be.
So many scenes in this movie are just flat out ruined by the background noise. More than once I caught something on my second viewing only because the words made sense once I knew what was going to happen. So on my second viewing, a lot of aha moments happened that should have been there the first time. Without this audio assault, this movie probably would have been much better received the first go around. It's really a shame to have to deduct so many points simply because the audio department didn't get the memo that it's good to be able to hear the actors talk. But if I had a second critique, it would be that the story would have been much better in the form of a horror anthology like Tales from the Crypt or Creepshow. There's some really good stuff happening, but it feels like it's spread incredibly thin in order to make it to a feature length. Drop it down to a 30-minute episode or a 40-minute segment in a collection of similar stories, and I think this one would have really knocked it out of the park. But this mental motion picture has a little bit of thought-provoking content, so it's time for another segment of douchey philosophical debate that no one asked for. One thing I love that this movie did was allow a couple of our characters to develop their mental powers and witness how differently each one changed. But it makes one wonder why Warren was destroyed by the power while Larry wasn't. Seems pretty obvious the main reason between the two is how they feel about themselves. Warren clearly hates himself, but Larry seems pretty content with who he is. The one thing they have in common is they'd like some female companionship. And in that department, Warren obsesses over a woman who is not interested in him, while Larry seems to be fine with just a little bit of less serious fun. Larry even admits he prefers to use his powers in frivolous ways, and Warren chastises him for this. And that's clearly the difference. Warren's powers can never give him exactly what he wants. A willing Sandy. He can only force her to do what she doesn't want to do, leading to him never truly being satisfied. So like a nerdy Tim the Toolman Taylor, he's going to need more power. Early on, Warren uses his new abilities to meet a lady at the bar, and we can argue that she is only with him because he's compelling her to do so. But at no point does she act like Sandy in showing clear confusion over how she's acting. Which might suggest that she was willing to hook up with Warren all along, but it's hard to meet someone if you don't take your best shot. Once the mental power exercises gives him confidence, he's a lot more willing to try. He admits that she was an experiment, but was it the telekinesis that won her over? Or a confident Warren? It's hard to say since we never see her again, but I prefer to think it was more his confidence. Unfortunately, it was due to his newfound abilities instead of building it up himself. It's very interesting when we find out that Larry had full access to the entire document, and even the knowledge of the device didn't entice him like it did Warren. In fact, Larry was smart enough to know how dangerous it was for his friend to be aware of such information and smartly tried to keep it from him. Larry's reaction to mind control definitely cancels out the absolute power corrupts absolutely idea. But I actually have another idea that feels like a better fit for this movie. Years ago, I watched a documentary about people who had won the lottery and how the money had destroyed their lives. But there was one couple who won a giant jackpot and created a very nice life for themselves. In one of the interviews with financial experts, a phrase was uttered that feels like a better fit for Larry and Warren. If you're unhappy without money, you'll be unhappy with money. Meaning that you're the same person regardless of your financial situation. The majority of the lottery winners had some very tragic circumstances come their way, and it was strongly suggested that the money only made those people more of what they already were. They were unhappy when they were poor or middle class, and the newly found riches only gave them the ability to find more expensive ways of destroying themselves. Drugs, alcohol, shady investment, fast cars, hitmen, none of which they'd have as much access to without the money. And that feels more like a fit for our movie. If you hate yourself without telekinesis, you'll hate yourself with telekinesis. And that's why Warren became a twisted, shrieking brain monster, and his best friend became Leisure Suit Larry. Of course, that's just my opinion. I could be really fucking wrong. Anyway, that's enough two-handed bullshit shoveling. Time for me to wash up and have some lunch. So until I darken your doorstep for another dismal ditty, this is your demented debutante Sugar Pants. See you in your dreams.
I should be in the Pacific trying to school a turtle. Our tacos are more the same. What? What did you say? I said, the way things are going, I should be trying to screw a turtle.